Everyone in the room could feel the tension the moment she walked in. Emma wasn't the kind of woman who drew attention with flashy clothes or dramatic makeup. She was soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and wore a simple dress that day, the kind that some people might call plain. But today wasn't just any day. It was the wedding of her closest friend's fiancé, and Emma had been invited as a last-minute bridesmaid. While the bride had insisted she be part of the big day, the other bridesmaids didn't agree. From the moment Emma arrived, whispers started, side eyes, forced smiles. They mocked her dress, giggled at her shoes, and made sure she felt every inch of the distance between her and their high-end designer vibes. But Emma didn't let it show. She helped where she could, smiled through the stares. She was the type who didn't need attention but didn't deserve humiliation either. Behind the scenes, the bridesmaids were texting and laughing, saying things no one would dare say out loud, calling her the charity case, wondering why she was even here, and saying she looked like a backup florist. What they didn't know was that the groom, Michael, was watching everything. And what none of them could have expected was what he'd reveal just moments before saying I do. As the ceremony began, Emma stood quietly to the side, hands clasped, eyes low. The guests had no idea there was tension brewing beneath all the flowers and music. But Michael's eyes weren't on his bride. They were locked on the bridesmaids and then on Emma. Then the moment came. Everyone rose as the bride walked in, glowing, flawless, unaware that the next 5 minutes would turn her entire fairy tale into something very, very different. What could the groom possibly know? Why was he glancing at Emma with a look that wasn't pity, but something closer to guilt? And what secret had been hidden all along, one so powerful it would stop the entire wedding in its tracks? What Michael said at the altar left the guests in stunned silence, and the bridesmaids wishing they had never opened their mouths in the first place. Stick around, you won't believe what happened next. Rewind to just a few weeks before the wedding, and the story takes a different shape. Emma wasn't a stranger to the bride, Jessica. In fact, they had known each other since college. Emma had once helped Jessica through one of the toughest times of her life when Jessica lost her father. They weren't best friends by any means, but Emma had been there when it counted. That's why it came as a surprise when Emma got the call, just 10 days before the wedding, asking her to be a bridesmaid. Jessica said one of the original girls dropped out and she could really use someone she trusts. Emma didn't hesitate. She never thought twice about helping people, but from the moment she agreed, things felt off. The group chat with the bridesmaids was cold. No one welcomed her. No one offered to help with her dress choice or coordinate outfits. At the rehearsal dinner, they laughed at private jokes and made sure Emma was always one step behind. Still, Emma pushed those feelings aside. She believed maybe they were just stressed, and that weddings brought out the worst in some people. What Emma didn't know was that Jessica had told a very different story to her bridesmaids. One where Emma wasn't a kind friend, but an old charity case who used to beg for help in college. Jessica made it seem like inviting Emma was just an act of kindness, a favor she was doing for someone who'd never really fit in. And the bridesmaids, all loyal to Jessica, treated Emma exactly how they thought she deserved to be treated. Meanwhile, Michael, the groom, had been noticing everything. From day one, he couldn't understand why Emma looked so uncomfortable. He had seen her a few times before, once when she dropped off a gift for Jessica, and again at a fundraiser, and she always came across as warm, humble, and genuine. Not the kind of person who should be made to feel invisible. Something didn't sit right with him. Then, 2 days before the wedding, Michael overheard something that changed everything. A conversation between Jessica and her maid of honor, filled with laughter and a confession. What he heard that night shook him to the core, and it planted the seed for what he'd soon reveal in front of everyone. But first, the wedding had to begin. The ceremony had started, but Michael's mind wasn't on the vows or the music. It kept replaying the words he'd overheard just 2 nights ago when Jessica and her maid of honor, Brooke, thought no one else was in the room. They were sipping wine and laughing as they went through the seating chart. And then Jessica, without hesitation, said, I only brought Emma in for the sympathy vote. She makes me look better by comparison. Brooke had laughed. I mean, she looks like she bought that dress from a thrift store sale bin. Jessica smirked. Exactly. Every bride needs one friend uglier and sadder than her. Makes you shine brighter. Michael froze behind the half-closed door, his heart sinking. He wanted to believe he misunderstood, but there was no denying what he heard. And the worst part, Jessica never once sounded like she regretted saying it. That moment peeled back a version of her he'd never seen. Cruel, calculating, fake.as. He stood at the altar now, watching her approach in her lace gown. All he could think about was Emma quietly standing to the side, trying to blend in, completely unaware of the conversation that had exposed everything. Meanwhile, Emma could feel the eyes on her. The bridesmaid still whispered. Brooke gave her a smug glance as she walked past. One of the others giggled behind her hand. Emma's stomach twisted, but she stayed calm. She reminded herself why she came to support someone who once meant something to her, no matter how cold she'd become lately. She didn't know what she'd done wrong. She never expected to be welcomed like family, but she never imagined she'd be mocked like an outsider either. Elsewhere in the crowd, Jessica's cousin, Lily, sat quietly gripping her phone. She had seen the messages. Brooke had left her phone unattended in the bridal suite, and Lily had seen the group chat where Emma was the main topic of ridicule. Lily had always looked up to Jessica, but reading those messages made her sick. She didn't say anything yet. She didn't want to cause drama, but something told her this wedding wasn't going to go as planned. Back at the altar, Michael's hands were clenched, his jaw tight. He'd made up his mind. Everyone thought this would be a perfect wedding day. They had no idea what was about to unfold. As Jessica reached the altar, all eyes were on her, but Michael's eyes shifted briefly to Emma. She stood there quietly, her posture straight, but her fingers fidgeted with the small ribbon tied around her bouquet. That was the only hint of nerves. She didn't know it yet, but she wasn't just a side character in this moment, she was at the center of it. Jessica smiled at Michael, full of confidence, full of charm. She leaned in and whispered, "Ready to be the luckiest man alive?" Her voice was sweet, but to Michael, it felt hollow now. He nodded slightly, more out of habit than feeling, and turned toward the officiant. In the pews, Lily's heart pounded. She stared at the bridesmaids, each one smug and unbothered, totally unaware that their words had been overheard and screenshots saved. She thought about what Emma must be feeling, standing next to the very women who had made her the target of their jokes. Emma didn't deserve this. Not any of it. The officiant began speaking, moving through the standard lines about love, trust, and partnership. Jessica beamed for the crowd. Cameras clicked. Everything looked picture perfect. But behind the stillness, something was shifting. Michael's breathing grew slower, heavier. He looked at the faces in front of him. Jessica, polished and glowing. Then Emma, standing behind her, not even trying to outshine anyone, just quietly present. And then he glanced at Brooke, the maid of honor, who gave him a quick wink like she was in on some private joke. That was it. That sealed it. The officiant turned to Michael. "Do you, Michael, take Jessica to be your lawfully wedded wife?" The room hushed. Everyone leaned in. Michael looked at Jessica, then turned slightly, just enough to catch Emma in his line of vision. A long silence fell over the crowd. Jessica squeezed his hand tighter, like she could control the moment by sheer force. "Babe?" she whispered, her voice edged with confusion. But Michael didn't answer. He slowly pulled the mic toward him. "I need to say something before I give my answer," he said, voice steady, but sharp enough to slice through the silence. Gasps rippled through the pews. The bridesmaids shifted uncomfortably. Jessica's expression cracked for a split second. Emma blinked. She hadn't expected this. No one had. The entire room waited, breathless, not knowing that everything they thought about this day was about to change. Michael's words hung in the air like a storm about to break. Jessica's smile faltered. The guests leaned forward. Even the officiant paused, unsure whether to continue or step back. "I can't say I do until I clear my conscience," Michael said slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on Emma again. "Because someone here doesn't deserve what's been done to her." Murmurs broke out across the pews. The bridesmaids looked around, confused until it hit them. One by one, Their faces turned pale. Jessica let out a forced laugh, trying to shake the moment off. Michael, if this is some kind of dramatic speech, can we maybe save it for after the vows? But Michael didn't budge. He turned to face the audience now. Emma was invited to this wedding out of so-called friendship. But what most of you don't know is that she's been mocked, insulted, and humiliated by the very people standing beside us on this stage. A hush fell over the crowd again. Jessica stepped forward, trying to take control. Michael, stop. This is embarrassing. He held up a hand. Not for me. Maybe for you. Jessica's lips parted, shocked. Brooke whispered something to the bridesmaid next to her, both of them suddenly uneasy. They hadn't expected this. No one had. Then, before Michael could continue, another voice spoke out from the middle of the crowd. Can I say something? All heads turned. It was Lily, Jessica's cousin. She stood up slowly, phone in hand. I didn't plan to say anything, but I can't sit here and watch this go on like nothing happened. Jessica's face froze. I saw the messages. Lily continued, voice trembling but clear. Screenshots of the group chat where they tore Emma apart, called her names, said she was only here to make the rest of them look better. Jessica's eyes darted to Brooke. Did you show her my phone? Brooke's mouth opened, but no words came. You were all laughing at her, Lily said, now facing the guests. And Emma didn't say a word. She just showed up with grace. Gasps echoed. Again, Emma stood frozen, unsure what to do, what to feel. The guests were no longer watching Jessica. They were watching her, but the spotlight wasn't cruel this time. It was shifting, and just when it felt like the moment couldn't get heavier, Michael turned back to Jessica and pulled something from his suit pocket. Everyone leaned in, and what he held made the entire room gasp again. In Michael's hand was a folded piece of paper, creased, slightly worn, like it had been read more than once. He looked at Jessica one last time before unfolding it. This, he said, voice steady but heavy with meaning, is a letter Emma wrote to you 3 years ago. You never responded, but I found it when I was packing a box at your place last month. Jessica's eyes widened. Why would you? Michael continued, ignoring her. In it, she thanked you for helping her through college, for being the one person who stood by her when no one else did. She called you her sister. She even said if you ever needed anything, she'd drop everything to be there. The audience went silent again, a thick stillness hanging over the room. She wrote all that while living in a tiny apartment, working night shifts, and still found time to send you birthday gifts you never even opened. Michael looked straight at Jessica. Now, and you invited her here to mock her? Jessica's face crumbled, no longer able to hide behind her smile. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some guests were shaking their heads. Others were looking at Emma with something close to guilt. Emma stood motionless, stunned by everything unraveling around her. Then came the final blow. Michael took a breath and looked out at everyone. This wedding's not happening. I can't marry someone who treats people like this, especially not someone who uses loyalty as a prop. The crowd gasped. Jessica looked like she'd just been slapped. She reached for his hand, but he stepped back, and then, the twist no one expected, he turned to Emma. I know this is insane. I know this isn't the time or place, but I've spent the last few weeks watching how you carry yourself, quiet, kind, never once lowering yourself to their level. I wish I had met you before all this. Emma's eyes widened. Michael, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Just don't disappear. Don't let what they did push you back into the shadows. Jessica was speechless. The bridesmaids looked down, completely exposed, and as Michael stepped off the altar and walked toward the back of the room, guests slowly began standing, some even clapping. The wedding didn't happen that day, but something far more honest did, and just when it seemed like it was all over, Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a letter of her own. What it said would change everything again. Emma stood at the edge of the altar, still stunned, still trying to catch up with everything that had just happened. The room had gone from a picture-perfect wedding scene to a moment of raw truth no one would forget. As Michael made his way down the aisle, all eyes turned back to Emma when she quietly pulled a letter from her small purse, its envelope a bit worn, the corners bent. With trembling hands, she looked up at the crowd and then at Jessica, who stood frozen in place. Emma's voice was soft, but clear enough to reach everyone. "I wrote this the night I got your invitation," she said. "At first, I thought it was a mistake. After all these years of silence, you asked me to stand beside you on your wedding day, and I wanted to believe it meant something." She opened the letter and read a few lines. "I told you in this letter how proud I was of you, that no matter what had passed between us, I wished you happiness, but I never mailed it. Something in me felt like it wouldn't matter." Tears welled in Jessica's eyes now, but it wasn't enough to undo the damage. Emma folded the letter and slipped it back into her purse. "I didn't come here to be seen. I came because I thought you wanted a friend. But today showed me the difference between being invited and being valued." The guests were quiet, reflective. Some nodded, some looked away, uncomfortable with the truth of it all. Later, outside the venue, Michael stood by the steps, hands in his pockets. Emma approached slowly. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "I'm sorry," she said. "You didn't have to defend me like that." Michael smiled, tired but genuine. "Someone needed to. And maybe I needed to see it all for what it really was." They didn't talk about what would happen next. There was no promise, no sudden fairy tale ending. But in that moment, there was understanding. A beginning built on honesty. Jessica quietly left the venue with her bridesmaids trailing behind her, their laughter gone. Lily stayed behind, helping Emma gather her things. "You changed the room today," she whispered, and she had. A simple woman, once mocked and dismissed, had shown the power of quiet strength and truth. And in the end, it wasn't the dress or the title that made the biggest impact, it was her heart. And that's the story no one will forget.